You're listening to the Huddle Up Podcast with Chad Jensen and Zack Kelberman. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com and sound off. And now it's time to drop some knowledge.
Welcome in, everybody, to the Huddle Up Podcast, presented, as always, by Mile High Huddle and 24/7 Sports, powered by Overtime Media. I'm your host, Chad Jensen. With me, as always, is my partner in crime. You know him. You love him. Is your Denver Broncos reporter for 24/7 Sports. He is Zack Kelberman. Zack, the day has finally arrived. The rookies are out on the grass, and we finally have some real Broncos meat to sink our teeth into.
Man, finally, I was starving there for a while, Chad. We had nothing to go on. It was getting tough, and we were crafting these content stories. We were keeping Broncos Country fed, but we needed this mini camp desperately, and I'm so happy it's here because we've gleaned more insight into this rookie class. A little bit, not too much. Not the way Fangio wants to play it and play his cards, but I like some things that were said today that we're going to talk about.
And here's maybe a little teaser, not a spoiler, a teaser. Turns out Garrett Bowles wasn't smoking that crack. He was right.
He was right. He was prophetic.
Right. Yeah, and we're going to talk about exactly how Garrett Bowles was right here in just a minute. But just a couple of quick matters of business. You guys, make sure you're following the show on Twitter. Easy to do. It's the best way, at Huddle Up Pod, to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening with the show in real time. And then don't forget to leave your creative review and rate the show on iTunes. Zach and I, of course, always appreciate that. It's a huge way and an easy way for you to help support the show. All right, Zach, so Garrett Bowles, spills the beans a couple days ago via Nikki Jabvala of The Athletic. The Broncos had finally got me a left guard, which was kind of a weird indictment of sorts on Ronald Leary, or at least kind of a passive-aggressive shot across the bow at Ronald Leary, because Ronald Leary has been here for the last 2 years, and I get, that he finished half last season, or more so even, on injured reserve, but what
did Ronald Leary do to Garrett Bowles?
Right, what did he do? What's going on? But, of course, Dalton Risner shows up to day one of rookie minicamp, and sure enough, that's exactly where they played him, left guard.
I was shocked when he said that. I was like, what? Did he misspeak? Did he say something he shouldn't have said? Was it an error? But apparently Bowles knew something, and they are starting Risner at left guard. And I don't know, Chad. I'm surprised by this. I don't know about you, but I prefer Risner at right guard. I feel like that was a natural spot for him. And Leary, as we talked about, healthy, and that's a big if. I mean, he has Pro Bowl potential here, so I was definitely taken aback by that.
Well, here's what I don't get. Ronald Leary's specialty, where he grew his name, his brand, whatever you want to call it. He never made the Pro Bowl in Dallas, but he was just this side of the Pro Bowl. And probably the reason he wasn't in the Pro Bowl is, you can't make the entire starting offensive line of the Dallas Cowboys Pro Bowlers in one season. So understandably, he was like the one undrafted guy on the offensive line, basically. So he was the one on the outside looking in when it came time to vote for the Pro Bowl. But all those 5 years he was in Dallas, left guard. So then he signs with the Broncos. They pay him 4 years, $36 million. And that first spring, they started him at left guard with Max Garcia at right guard. It lasted basically about an OTA, and then they realized that Max Garcia was struggling to play right guard, and they thought, well, Larry's a vet. He's savvy enough. We'll switch him back to right guard and put Garcia at left guard, who, let me remind everybody, had started the entire previous season at left guard. And so everything's copacetic. Well, that season went down in flames. Fast forward to 2018, the Broncos get their wits together and go, look, we're paying this guy $9 million a year. Let's put him in the best position possible to succeed. Let's put him in the place that is his area of expertise, Zach, and that's left guard. And he started the season, got 6 games in, tore his Achilles. So in one sense, Garrett Bowles is right. It kind of has been a turnstile next to him at left guard, but it's basically because Ronald Leary's gotten injured.
I just thought the Broncos would want the veteran guy next to Bowles to kind of settle him down and not the rookie next to him. I just thought that'd be the better arrangement there. The only thing I can think of is Leary's Achilles isn't healed yet, and they're just plugging him in there. But then again, Fangio talked about wanting Risner to be cross-trained to play tackle, guard, and center. Maybe they want him to take McGovern's spot eventually. Maybe they want him to take Bowles' spot, James' spot. We don't know how this offensive line is going to shake out. But if Leary's healthy, and he said on Twitter recently that he's running at full speed and he's 100%, I don't know why he would play left guard and not have Risner at right guard, but I got to defer to Mike Munchak, I guess, at this point.
Yeah. I mean, we all assumed when Dalton Risner was taken in the second round, okay, the Broncos now have their starting right guard. The starting five has been assembled. Garrett Bowles, Ron Leary, Connor McGovern, Dalton Risner, and then Juwan James at right tackle, but they're switching, it would seem, those two right guard spots. And I don't think it's necessarily the end of the world, but honestly, the two issues, again, are what I said. Number one, he's now your second highest paid offensive lineman, Ron Leary, behind Juwan James. And so you would think you would want that guy, you'd want to extract every nickel of value out of that investment by playing him at his natural position. A. B, the fact that, like you said, that was a great point, dude. The Broncos, Garrett Bowles has been basically a flag, drawing machine since he's been a Bronco. He's been amongst the league leaders in flags. Even though the second half of the season last year, he kind of steadied out and showed signs that he was turning the corner in terms of discipline. But still, he's young. He's not the sharpest tool in the shed. He misses things. Having a veteran next to him like Ron Leary takes pressure off him. Ron can point to him. He can talk to him. Hey, look, help him identify blitzers, blocking schemes, all the pre-snap stuff. And if it's a stunt, recognizing that, helping to pick it up because you have that veteran experience and savvy. And it's not that, Zach, I don't think Dalton Risner has the propensity to become that type of savvy interior guard and to help a guy like Garrett Bowles, but just not out of the gates at the same level that a true veteran like Leary could do.
Well, the thing to me is Leary is good in pass protection, and that's where Bowles struggles. So I thought they would want them to be kind of side by side and kind of offset each other in that sense. I don't know. Even Fangio said, though, it's all premature right now. Nothing is determined. Nothing is settled. When OTAs start on Monday, I think they'll have everyone integrate, and maybe we'll get a clearer picture. We can't make any determinations right now. I just was surprised they're going that route. But like you said, either way, it's an upgrade. If they get a healthy Leary and Dalton Risner coming in, this offensive line with Mike Munchak is still top 10 potential.
Yeah, and let me just say one last thing, and we'll move on, is that it's not the end of the world if Ronald Leary ends up playing right guard. He'll do just fine. And really, the Broncos were fine with him at right guard in 2017. It was the lapses of Max Garcia on the left side that were probably, aside from Bowles' holding issues, the biggest thorn in the Broncos' side that year. So it's fine if they want to put him there. It's just questionable, and we'll see how, of course, it comes out in the wash. But, Zach, my goodness, did Noah Fant look good in orange and blue?
Yes, he did.
Watching his film, okay, obviously you see his size, 6'5", 250 pounds, runs a 4.5. He's an animal, okay? He's a freak. But he looked even bigger to me today. We're recording this Friday evening. He looked even bigger to me, all padded up in full Broncos regalia than he did on tape. And I'm just trying to, project forward the type of mismatch monster he's going to be for the Denver Broncos moving forward.
Yeah, listen, I made it a point tonight to not make any, rash decisions or determinations about a rookie minicamp. I think it's still meaningless right now. But I'm not going to lie and say Noah Fant, he reminded me exactly of Jimmy Graham. Just what I saw from the pictures of him, like you said, the way he stood out, he looked like a man amongst boys. It just wasn't even close. And I'm excited. To have that kind of weapon in this offense for Joe Flacco with all the other weapons, it's definitely positive. Of course, I want to see it all come together. I want to see it happen in the regular season. He still has to earn his role. According to Vic Fangio, he still has to beat out Hireman and Bud and Fumagalli. I think he will, though. And like you said, it's definitely exciting, though, to see that first-round pick just immediately stand out and pop.
And he talked about, after practice, one of the things that he believes gives him kind of a leg up as opposed to a lot of other tight ends entering the NFL is the fact that, of course, he hails from tight end U. He hails from Iowa. And even though he played next to T.J. Hawkinson, and, Hawkinson ended up going pick 8, 12 selections ahead of him in the draft and whatnot, because it was Iowa and the pro system that they run and the focus they have on the tight end position, he wasn't like a lot of tight ends coming into the NFL trained and coached only on being that F guy, the move tight end. He was expected to learn, know, and be able to execute both the F and the Y, inline and split out. And he thinks that gives him a leg up, as he steps into his new life as a pro, Zach. And I think that's absolutely true. And again, I think there's a great foundation for him to start off as the number one tight end in line. You're right. He still has to earn his role. They're going to get their welcome to the NFL moment when the vets arrive here in a couple of weeks and all that. But, he has a good basis in that already. He can block better than he's given credit, and he has the experience, and he's already received that coaching. So I'm a lot higher on him in terms of being able to step in out of the gates maybe as tight end one, play that, that position in line, help block on first and second down, and then, throw in a few curveballs on first and second down where it's the play action, and all of a sudden he leaks out from being lined up to the left tackle, and, Flacco's able to hit him over the middle or down the seam.
Yeah, on my projected depth chart, I listed him as a starter. I think you don't draft a tight end number 20 and not play him. Eventually, he'll get the role, barring any surprising nosedive. And what's encouraging is he's already connected with the new Broncos tight end coach, who doesn't get a lot of shine. He's being out headlined by the Fangios and the Donatells, but Wade Harmon. He's already connected with him, and these are the values of these rookie minicamp practices, Chad. A lot of coaches and fans and media think it's pointless, but these reps are invaluable right now. And like Fangio said, you don't want to throw these young players into the fray right away on Monday for OTAs. You got them some time alone with the coaching. You got them some time alone with your future franchise quarterback in Drew Lock. It's definitely encouraging, and I'm with you. It won't be long before he leapfrogs up the depth chart and is a starter.
Yeah, it just hit home today, watching the tape, clips on Twitter, and some of the replays on DenverBroncos.com of practice. It just hit home to me how rare of a specimen Noah Fant is. And he just looked like an enormous monster, all padded up in Broncos orange and blue. And then you got to remember that he runs a 4.5 40. I know Joe Flacco's got to be licking his chops right now, because that kid, he's too fast for a linebacker to hang with, and he's too big and physical for most defensive backs. So the Broncos, that could be one of those home run picks for John Elway in the first round. He's kind of had some ups and downs in round one over the last couple of years, but it's looking like, to me, knock on wood, a lot still has to come out in the wash, though, that they're at least on the right path with Noah Fant. And as far as Drew Lock, what jumped out to you watching some of the snapshots and video of him today, Zach?
From what we saw, his live arm, you just can't deny his arm talent. It just pops on film. Even if it's a 5-second video clip on Twitter, he can throw from any angle. Just to roll out and work with Scangarello, I like that. They were by themselves in the field house. It was Rippon, Locke, and Scangarello just getting some reps under center. They want Locke to clean up his technique, his footwork, and they're already starting on that. So that's another thing why I like these rookie practices. It gives them some one-on-one time, and you have a new offensive coordinator, a first-time guy in Scangarello. You have a very, very raw quarterback who has no pressure to play, and you have an undrafted free agent who's pushing him to be the number 2. So I like what I saw from a fundamental standpoint and from a progression standpoint, as much as you can read into in one practice anyway.
Yeah. It jumped out to me, my thought anyway, and I tweeted about this, is that if you're Brett Rippon and you're seeing, across from you on the field, Drew Lock, he's like doing multiple things. He's in the middle of a conversation, talking to his coaches, and then the ball comes to him, and he just rips it like nonchalant, If you are a guy like the Boise State product, Brett Rippon, I know here's how I'd be thinking. I'd be going like, dang, dude, I got to put a little bit more mustard on these throws. I got to try and match what Locke's doing. And Locke's, you can tell, it's not that he's not trying, but it's just the natural way in which he uncorks the ball. It just comes out quick, and it gets there quick. The arm strength is phenomenal, and I wonder what kind of psychological process a young guy like Brett Rippon is going through, because talking to him at the Combine, he's he was very reserved, kind of quiet. You can tell he's very supremely self-confident, as most quarterbacks are, but I wonder what kind of psychological process he's going through right now.
Rippon seems like a pretty heady guy, and if the Broncos coaching staff was smart, they'd be real with him and say, you're not as good from a physical standpoint as Drew Lock. You don't have the arm as him. Your name isn't Drew Lock. Be Brett Rippon. You're not going to probably be the quarterback of the future. He probably will be. You could be a great backup in this league, maybe a fringe starter. Just be you. He has some tools that he's advanced at this stage already than Drew Lock has. It's just he has to be himself. So if he lets himself go the Paxton Lynch route, Chad, where he lets his mind just devour in on itself, you're going to see the same kind of flame out as you saw with Lynch.
And by the way, Noah Fant did give Brett Rippon some kind of props today when he took some time at the podium. He was asked specifically, Fant, about what it's been like, catching balls from Drew Lock. Here's the quote specifically. He says, quote, "Drew throws a great ball. We had two quarterbacks out there today. We had Drew and Brett Rippon. Both of them made some great passes out there and did their job. They did great out there today. There are definitely things to improve on, but I thought they did a good job," close quote. Now, what's interesting about that is he's throwing the undrafted guy a bone because he wasn't asked about Brett Rippon. He was asked about Drew Lock.
I think it's Fant kind of being a good teammate. If they were standing right there, he's not going to just single out Drew Lock and not mention Rippon. But yeah, both quarterbacks come with some sort of allure. Lock is a second-round pick, and Rippon got a six-figure guarantee. So all the players are wise to that, and he's not going to kind of exclude one and praise the other.
It's definitely a good opportunity, though, for Brett Rippon. We've talked a lot about how he could fit into the Broncos' long-term plans. I still think he has a ways to go in terms of even penciling himself in as a QB3, a healthy scratch on game days, making the 53-man roster. But he's guaranteed to have a place on the practice squad in Denver unless the Broncos were to waive him and another team tried to claim him off waivers. But from my understanding is, of course, the Broncos offered him that significant guarantee, which exceeds what the standard salary is for practice squad players. So if you're a team out there who maybe, we just look into the future a little bit, and let's just say Brett Rippon has a great preseason, and some of the teams out there who might have been interested in him that were making calls to him after the draft, he ultimately, of course, chose to sign with the Broncos. But those teams liked what they saw in preseason even more and convince themselves, you know what, he's hitting the wire, let's pull the trigger and get him in here because he's better than our third guy. We'll stack him on the practice squad. They'd have to be willing to take that money that the Denver Broncos gave him in guarantee.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And maybe Elway learned his lesson with Kyle Sloter, and maybe they'll carry 3 just for that reason. But yeah, based on his potential and the Broncos, the money they gave him, he's locked into at least a practice squad spot, and they have to hope that no other team poaches him. But I would probably, if they can sneak him, if they can squeeze it, I'd carry 3. You have your veteran and your former Super Bowl MVP, and you have 2 young, great prospects with a young quarterback developer. So that's what I would do. I wouldn't risk Rippon on the practice squad.
Well, we still do have a few things we want to land on from day one of Broncos rookie minicamp. We're going to get to that here in just a minute. First, we got to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, so let's talk about some of the things Vic Fangio observed from day one of Denver Broncos rookie minicamp. And one of them, of course, and we knew this was coming, this is no secret, but the Broncos were trying their 5th-round pick, Justin Hollins, both at edge and off-ball linebacker. And Fangio actually gave us an even more specific window into the thinking the team has right now, where they're putting him in, Hollins, in at outside linebacker edge in base defense, and then putting him at off-ball in nickel, where you can capitalize on his length and his speed, Zach.
Yeah, that's a huge inside linebacker to happen. If they can mold him in that role, that's a weapon for this Broncos defense. At first, when he was selected, I wanted him to be a strict pass rusher, but I kind of warmed up to the idea of him playing off ball. And if he can use him in nickel situations, and you have Vaughn and Chubb rushing from the outside, maybe Draymond Jones up front, I mean, that's a scary defensive front and just another option, another scenario for Vic Fangio. It's definitely intriguing.
Right. And, it's interesting, though, that the Broncos kind of have to walk the razor's edge because just in the same way that Fangio talked about Risner in terms of, we're trying him at left guard first. We'll see where he ends up developing his home, so to speak, and then he can build on that. Versatility is great and all, but the guys have to kind of figure out what their home is in terms of their primary position. And that applies similarly to Hollins, or exactly the same way, in fact, not similarly. So for the Broncos, it's a matter of not dumping too much on him because you want him to be excellent at whatever his job is. And even though versatility is great, if you spread yourself too thin trying to do 2 jobs, you can get lost in the shuffle. So my hope is that the Denver Broncos figure out quickly that either A, Hollins is remarkably good at off-ball, that's where we think he can help us the most, thus that's going to be our main focus, or vice versa, he's an edge, He's got some propensity there at off ball. It's something we'll kind of use as a feather in our cap, and we'll develop him when the opportunities arise, and we'll give him reps there in training camp and whatnot. But his main focus needs to be learning the edge. One way or another, as exciting as that versatility is for a guy like Justin Hollins, the Broncos need to try and get specific, my opinion is, sooner rather than later for the sake of his long-term upside.
That's a great point. I don't want a DeMarcus Walker situation to repeat where they're forcing him to be a square peg in a round hole, learning outside linebacker and defensive end. Stick him in one spot. He's probably a better pass rusher at outside linebacker than an inside linebacker. It's a cool concept, but it also comes down to roster math, Chad. I mean, you have Jeff Holland. You have a bunch of inside linebackers pushing for roster spots. So what do you do? How do you classify him? I'm with you 100%. Pick him a certain spot and stay with him there.
We also learned that Joe Dineen, the undrafted rookie linebacker from Kansas, who we've talked about on the show, I wrote an article on him earlier this week. He was not a passion project of Vic Fangio. He was someone that Vic Fangio says he, watched a little tape on him. Here's what he said, in fact, quote, "I really didn't watch a lot of Dineen in preparation for the draft, but I do know that some of the scouts and linebacker coach had some feeling for him. We'll see. He's here now, and now I'll put my eyes on him," close quote.
That's a great quote.
Of course, he's going to put his eyes on him, and like we've talked about on the show many times, and credit to Cecil Lammey for coining this term, but Dineen stands to benefit from the Fangio bump. But it is interesting that he was a passion project of some scout, and it sounds like some input from Reggie Herring as well, Zach.
And it's nice to see that recommendation trickle all the way up to John Elway enough to make that selection. So it's definitely encouraging. I just want to see where they go ultimately with that, and I want to see picking a position for Dineen. And I want to see what they do, like I said, with roster math. I mean, who do you cut? Do you keep Dineen and you cut Joe Jones? You cut A.J. Johnson? What do you do with Dakota Watson? What do you do with Hollins? There's so many moving parts here. And as much as Dineen is a good prospect, this is a guy who his ceiling in the short term could be the practice squad.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was interesting, too, circling back to Noah Fant. Vic Fangio was asked, he's the first-round pick. He's got that pedigree, of course. Is he expected to establish himself or assert himself as a leader in the locker room with these rookies? And here's what Fangio said. He said, quote, "It's too early. These guys are all swimming right now. They're worried about leading themselves," close quote, which is true. But at the same time, these undrafted guys and the later drafted guys and the tryout guys, which, by the way, the Broncos hosted 47 players, which most of them are rookies. Only 4 of them are first-year carryovers. But anyway, they're all looking to guys like Fant, to Risner, to Locke, the high-round premium pick guys to be the leader. So in one sense, Fangio's absolutely right that he's probably pretty consumed with focusing on himself right now, Fant. But two things can be true at the same time. And the other one is that he's going to have to also exude the traits of a leader because that's how the other guys around him are going to be looking at him.
Yeah, I'm with you. And based on draft status, I mean, everyone, fans, the team, they're going to all expect Fant and Risner to perform and contribute right away. So it's definitely expectations. But after the first practice, I tend to agree with Fangio, and he doesn't want to put too much on their plate. He wanted to get these practices out of the way so they're not all thrown into the mix with veterans and OTA. So it was smart, and they're going to take them along slowly. But once Monday rolls around, Chad, I mean, there's no excuses. The training wheels come off.
And by the way, nothing really jumped out to Fangio with regard to Drew Lock on his first practice as a Bronco. That's fine. Nothing Drew Lock could do at this point, whether good or bad, should be something that the team ultimately reads too much into. And I liked what Fangio said. He goes, quote, "He's learning out there, so I try not to make any big value judgments here early," close quote, which is absolutely true. Now, in a sense, some of the tryout guys, they are getting those big value judgments right out of the gates because that's just the nature of the beast. But the younger or the draft picks and the more valued undrafted rookies, they're getting some of the benefit of the doubt. If they're not looking like aces in the hole right out of the gates, the team's going to show some patience and work with them. And, they look at it like, look, at worst, we have a whole summer to get these guys ready. But Drew Lock, what exactly can you expect to see if you're a coach on day one of minicamp, where you're spending half the time, at least for the portion in which media could observe, in the field house just throwing to coaches?
And, Fangio's not going to BS you. He's going to tell it like it is. This was Vance Joseph. He'd say, oh, yeah, Drew Lock dropped back nicely. He held the ball good. That's what more could he do? He stood around the field house. He threw some nice passes. He looked okay. But like I said, it's just a very limited simulation of a practice. It's not the real thing, not even close to it. So I like that Fangio is keeping it realistic and keeping in check while allowing these players to get the reps and allowing the development to occur, but not to build it up to something. It's not to say, oh, yeah, he took a big step right away. No. I mean, it's just one practice. Even the next couple of weeks, it's so infantile in the process, Yep.
Here's, though, what Dalton Risner said when he was asked specifically about how Drew Lock did in his first practice. He said, quote, "He did great. You would never have thought it was day one for him. Of course, he has things to work on like everyone does out there, but that's something that Drew brings to the table. He's not a quarterback that's going to hesitate or have trouble doing something like that in the huddle. He did a good job," close quote. And Locke himself spoke about how, assimilating not just the playbook, but being able as a quarterback, you have to be able to recite these plays in a way that makes sense. They're true. That's what the play is called, so that the young players in the huddle know what you're saying. And, you got to say it with confidence. It's not just what you say, it's how you say things. Reading your eyes, reading your confidence so that they can go out there and feel confident executing their responsibilities on a given play.
Yeah, and he even mentioned that it was a transition spitting out the play in the huddle, and he's going to literally go home in the mirror and recite those plays. That's how early on in the process Drew Lock is. It was literally day one for him. So as exciting as it was to see him in a Broncos uniform and slinging passes, there's so much work to be done, and that's why I laud Fangio for not getting carried away with this.
Let me ask you something, though. Do you think Paxton Lynch, day one of rookie minicamp, went home that night at the hotel room and recited plays to himself in the mirror?
He played video games. He wasn't reciting plays.
So that's encouraging. Drew Lock is very seriously approaching his new responsibility as the quarterback of the future for the Denver Broncos. And to me, that's the type of thing you want to hear from him, the type of commitment and passion and the seriousness with which he's embracing his new role with the Broncos as a pro.
I will say, just as when he did his conference call and his first press conference, I mean, he's great in front of the press. He's very charismatic, very natural. He exudes that natural leadership. So he has that it factor. And you can't teach that. You can't buy it. You can't draft it. He has that. And if they can just mold his physical talent along and his mental processing, they got themselves a quarterback.
By the way, people are wondering why Dalton Risner is wearing the jersey number 66, which is also, if I'm Dalton Risner, I'm not crying too many tears because, that's an homage of sorts. You got freaking Tom Nalen, Ring of Fame center, two-time Super Bowl champion center for the Denver Broncos, wore and rocked number 66. Of course, Dalton Risner wore number 71 at Kansas State, so that's his number. That's probably the number he had in high school, though I'm not sure of that. But someone already had it, and if I'm not mistaken, it's Austin Schlottman. Am I thinking right on that? Yeah. It's so yeah, and that's correct. It is Austin Schlottman, which right now, what a guy like Dalton Risner is thinking is Austin Schlottman. He's got 71 right now. Went undrafted last year. He earned some praise from the Broncos in training camp. Played well in the preseason. Earned a spot on the practice squad where he remained throughout the season. So the Broncos, of course, are keeping him within the organization, giving him another opportunity in what is going to be technically his first year, which is also why Schlottman is at rookie minicamp, because first-year players also are allowed to participate in rookie minicamps. But Risner's thinking to himself, that 71, if I play my cards right, we'll see what happens with Schlottman. Won't be surprised if I get that number by the time the summer's through.
Yeah, I won't be surprised if he gets his rookie contract next week and slides Schlottman a few racks and he gets his number. So I foresee that happening if he wants it. Though that number that he has now is pretty cool on him too.
I think it looks good on him, to be honest with you.
Me too.
It's not gospel, it's not absolute, but I think the 70 numbers are more appropriate for tackles, and the 60s and sometimes 50s are more appropriate for interior players.
Agreed. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm not a big numbers guy, but I'm with you on that.
But hey, again, we were just happy to have some real football stuff happening on Friday for us to be able to analyze. And there's going to be a lot more to come this weekend with the Denver Broncos continuing their rookie minicamp. And we're going to tackle all the takeaways, share with you all of our observations and what happens on Monday's episode of the Huddle Up podcast. But that is going to do it for today's episode. And, apologies. Thank you for bearing with us as we kind of tweaked our schedule this week. You're listening to this either Friday evening or Saturday morning, maybe even Sunday. So normally, of course, we publish Huddle Up Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. But because I had to travel this past week, we had to tweak the schedule. So thanks for bearing with us. But make sure you're following the show on Twitter at HuddleUpPod. Don't forget to leave your creative review and that 5-star rating on iTunes. You guys have no idea how much that helps us grow and reach new listeners. For example, last month, we were up over 15% from the previous month. And this month, we're already 22% over last month. And one of the reasons why that is that we're getting such great reviews from our listeners on iTunes. And so iTunes is putting our show in front of people who get onto iTunes and go, I want to listen to a Broncos podcast. Maybe they have no idea what Mile High Huddle is. They have no idea what 24/7 Sports is, but they're on iTunes and they want to listen to a Broncos podcast. So they search Broncos and we pop up because we have such high ratings and so many people listening to the show. So thanks to you guys for that. And make sure, by the way, you're following my partner, Zack Kelberman, on Twitter at Kelberman247, myself at Chad and Jensen. Have a great weekend, you guys. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there listening to the show, the great fans of the Denver Broncos and our great listeners. Of course, that's Sunday. So for those of you, the wifey, your mom, your grandma, make sure you take care of them because Sunday is their day. And then we will be back with you Monday. For Zack Kelberman, I'm Chad Jensen. We'll talk to you then.
You've been listening to the Huddle Up Podcast. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.